A woman worked as a maid in a magnificent mansion. Her boss, a millionaire, had an accident that left him paralyzed. She was only supposed to clean the house, but over the years, she gave him much more. Before listening to this heartwarming story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The Hawkins mansion gleamed under the afternoon sun of Los Angeles, its mirrored windows reflecting the blue sky like giant diamonds. Robert Hawkins, 35 years old, a successful tech entrepreneur, observed the city through the panoramic window of his office on the top floor. His empire was worth billions, but at that moment his thoughts were focused on something much more valuable, the engagement dinner that would take place in a few hours. Emily, his fiancée, was considered one of the most beautiful women in Los Angeles high society. Their relationship was a constant topic in the social columns, and the wedding promised to be the event of the year. Robert adjusted his Italian tie in front of the mirror, satisfied with his image. Everything in his life was meticulously planned and executed with precision. "Mr. Hawkins, your car is ready," announced James, his personal driver, through the intercom. Robert descended the marble stairs, passing by Sarah, the new maid who had started working at the mansion just 2 weeks ago. She was diligently cleaning. The banisters and something in her brown eyes conveyed a serenity that momentarily caught his attention. Sarah was a single mother, hired after a rigorous selection process by the housekeeper. Unlike the other employees, she had an air of mystery and a silent intelligence that manifested in small details. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted with a discreet smile, quickly lowering her gaze. Robert responded with an automatic nod, his mind already focused on the appointment he had ahead. The restaurant where he would meet Emily was on the other side of the city, and he despised delays. The rain began to fall as the car left the mansion gates. Robert checked messages on his cell phone while James drove the vehicle with his usual caution. On the radio, soft music filled the environment. The businessman smiled when he saw a message from Emily. "Can't wait to see you, my love." The familiar journey through the streets of Los Angeles took on a different air that afternoon. Raindrops slid down the bulletproof glass of the imported car, creating hypnotic patterns that Robert observed distractedly. His thoughts wandered between wedding preparations and an important meeting scheduled for the next day. That's when everything changed. A truck lost control on the wet road, skidding towards Robert's car. James tried an evasive maneuver, but the impact was inevitable. The world spun in slow motion, twisted metal, shattered glass, and then darkness. When Robert regained consciousness in the hospital, the first person he saw was Emily, her perfect face marked by tears. But there was something different in her gaze, something that he, in his state of confusion, couldn't immediately identify. What happened?" His voice came out hoarse. "There was an accident, my love," Emily replied, her voice trembling, "but you're going to be okay." It was then that Robert tried to move and realized. The horror in his eyes reflected the terrible reality that would change his life forever. His legs, which once took him to conquer the world, were no longer there. At the mansion, Sarah was organizing the master bedroom to receive her employer, who would return from the hospital in a few days. As she arranged the Egyptian silk sheets, her skilled hands worked with special delicacy, as if they could somehow ease the suffering that was to come. In the pocket of her uniform, a small notebook held sketches that no one had ever seen, technical drawings that would reveal in the future an extraordinary talent. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the city and marking the beginning of a story that would change not only Robert Hawkins' life, but everyone around him, in ways that no one could imagine. The day of Robert's return to the mansion arrived, laden with a heavy atmosphere. The Los Angeles sky was overcast, as if nature itself shared in the delicate moment. The imposing construction, which previously represented his success and power, now seemed intimidating with its extensive staircases and corridors. Sarah discreetly observed through the kitchen window as the adapted van parked at the main entrance. Her attentive eyes caught every detail, the way Emily kept her distance while the nurses assisted Robert with the wheelchair, his dejected countenance, so different from the confident businessman who had left there weeks ago. "Sarah, prepare Mr. Hawkins's room," ordered Mrs. Thompson, the housekeeper. Although the room had already been impeccable for hours, Sarah had spent the entire morning organizing everything, paying special attention to details that would facilitate her employer's new routine. "It's all ready, Mrs. Thompson," she responded softly, while adjusting one last time the special pillows she had researched and suggested for greater comfort. In the entrance hall, Robert faced his first battle, the pitying looks from the staff. Each familiar face now carried an expression that made him feel diminished. Emily by his side maintained a forced smile, her restless hands betraying her discomfort. "Darling, I need to sort out some wedding details," Emily announced as Robert was settled in his room. "I'll come back later to see how you're doing." Robert nodded, noticing how she avoided looking directly at the wheelchair. Since the accident, the kisses had become shorter, the touches more hesitant. But he refused to accept that anything had changed. It was just an adaptation phase, he told himself. The hours dragged on. The room, once a refuge, had transformed into a silent prison. It was during one of these moments of solitude that Sarah entered to do the daily cleaning. Unlike the others, her gaze carried no pity, only a serene understanding that intrigued. "Robert, do you need anything, sir?" she asked, her soft voice breaking the oppressive silence. "No, thank you," he responded automatically, but something made him continue. "Actually, could you open the window? This room is suffocating." Sarah moved with silent efficiency, opening the curtains and windows. The fresh breeze invaded the environment, bringing with it the scent of the garden. "Sometimes a little fresh air is all we need to see things from a new perspective," she commented, almost to herself. Robert observed her with curiosity. There was something different about that woman, a wisdom that didn't match her apparent simplicity. "Have you always worked as a housekeeper?" Sarah smiled discreetly while organizing the cleaning products. "Life takes us on unexpected paths, Mr. Hawkins. Each experience teaches us something valuable." Before he could continue the conversation, Emily returned, bringing with her the expensive perfume and nervous agitation. Sarah silently withdrew, leaving the couple alone. "We need to talk about the wedding plans," Emily began, sitting at a safe distance. "Maybe it's better if we postpone a bit until you're more adapted." The words hit Robert like a punch. "Postpone? Why? Nothing has changed, Emily. I'm still the same man." "It's not quite like that, Robert. We have to be realistic. Things have changed. The wedding of our dreams, the dances, the honeymoon, everything will have to be different now." Outside the room, Sarah was organizing the cleaning cart, her ears involuntarily catching the argument that followed. Her heart tightened as she heard the pleading tone in Robert's voice, contrasting with Emily's growing coldness. That night, after everyone had retired, Sarah went down to the mansion's basement. In a hidden corner among old boxes, she opened her sketchbook. In the dim light of a lamp, her skilled fingers traced precise lines, designing something that could change everything. The following days established a new routine in the mansion. Emily appeared less and less, always with excuses related to the preparations for the postponed wedding. Robert alternated between moments of fierce determination during physiotherapy, sessions and periods of deep melancholy. Sarah observed everything, always present in the shadows, executing her tasks with a dedication that went beyond professional duty. During the day, she cleaned, organized, and discreetly adapted small details of the house to facilitate Robert's mobility. At night, alone in the basement, she worked on her secret project, applying knowledge that no one imagined she possessed. One afternoon, while cleaning the office, Sarah found Robert staring fixedly at a photo of him and Emily, taken during a trip to Paris. "You know," he said, breaking the silence without averting his eyes from the photograph, "sometimes I wonder if she still sees me as the same man." Sarah paused her work, carefully choosing her words. "Sometimes, Mr. Hawkins, people surprise us, not always in the way we expect, but each surprise teaches us something about who we really are and who is really by our side." Robert turned to face her, intrigued by the depth of those words. For the first time, he really looked at Sarah, noticing the intelligence that shone in her brown eyes, the gentle strength in her hands calloused by work. The moment was interrupted by the sound of Robert's cell phone. It was Emily, once again cancelling her visit. Sarah silently returned to her work, leaving him alone with his thoughts. But something had changed in that brief moment of connection. In the basement, hidden under an old tarp, Sarah's project was beginning to take shape. Her nights of secret work, fueled by a purpose that even she didn't fully understand, were about to bear fruit. What no one knew was that this humble maid carried with her not only the gift of compassion, but also a technical knowledge that would transform Robert's life in ways he could never have imagined. The Los Angeles autumn painted the mansion's garden with golden hues, while Sarah observed Robert during his physiotherapy session in the outdoor area. Her hands automatically cleaned the windows, but her eyes carefully studied each movement, each expression of pain, each small victory. After 2 months since the accident, she had completely memorized his routine. Emily hadn't shown up for 5 days. The calls, once frequent, were now reduced to short messages and elaborate excuses. Robert tried to maintain a facade of normalcy, but Sarah noticed how his eyes lost their sparkle with each broken promise from his fiancée. "Sarah," Robert's voice surprised her after the physiotherapist left. "Could you help me get to the office?" "Of course, sir," she responded promptly, abandoning her cleaning cloth. During the journey through the corridors, Robert broke the silence. "Do you have children, Sarah?" "Yes, sir. An 8-year-old girl, Sophie." "And where does she stay while you work?" "At school during the day. At night, my neighbor takes care of her while I do extra work." She hesitated slightly in the last part. Robert noticed the hesitation but didn't comment. Arriving at the office, something unusual happened. He invited her to sit. "You're different from the other employees, Sarah. You don't look at me with pity. You don't whisper in corners. Why?" Sarah adjusted her apron, choosing her words. "Maybe because I know that physical limitations don't define who we are, Mr. Hawkins. My daughter was born with a condition that affected her mobility. The doctors said she would never walk, but she walks today, perfectly." Sarah, she smiled, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and something else, something that Robert couldn't decipher. That night, after her official shift ended, Sarah went down to the basement once more. Under the dim light, her skilled fingers worked on something that seemed far beyond the capabilities of a simple housekeeper. Metal pieces, circuits, and technical drawings were spread out on an improvised table. Meanwhile, in the main bedroom, Robert received a surprise visit from Emily. "Darling, we need to talk," she began, sitting on the edge of the bed, maintaining the usual distance. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about the future, about how you haven't visited me in almost a week," Robert interrupted, his voice laden with hurt. "Don't be unfair. I've been busy with the wedding preparations, you know that. The wedding that you insist on postponing indefinitely." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily got up, walking to the window. "Robert, you need to understand. Things have changed. It's not easy for me either." In the basement, Sarah could hear the echo of the argument through the ventilation system. Her hands continued working, driven by an even greater determination. The project she was working on was almost ready. A revolutionary prosthesis, developed with knowledge she kept hidden from her past. The following days brought a new dynamic to the mansion. Emily started to appear more frequently, although her visits seemed more motivated by guilt than love. Robert, in turn, began to find strange comfort in conversations with Sarah, who always appeared at the right moments with precise words and an understanding look. One afternoon, while Sarah was cleaning the room, Robert surprised her with a question. "How did you manage to help your daughter walk?" Sarah froze for a moment, her cleaning cloth suspended in the air. "Sometimes, Mr. Hawkins, love leads us to do extraordinary things, to seek solutions where others only see impossibilities." "You speak as if you were more than a maid," he observed, his eyes fixed on her. "We are all more than we appear to be," she responded softly, returning to her work. That night, in the basement, Sarah gave the final adjustments to her secret project. The prostheses were ready, a masterpiece of biomechanical engineering, the fruit of sleepless nights and knowledge she had left behind long ago. Now she needed to find a way to get them to Robert without revealing their origin. Fate, however, had other plans. Emily, during one of her visits, accidentally discovered a set of prostheses in development in Robert's room, an initial project that the medical team was preparing. Seeing an opportunity for redemption there, She took credit, presenting herself as the mentor of the project. "I wanted to surprise you," she said, tears in her eyes. "I've been researching so much, talking to specialists." Robert, moved by the apparent gesture of love, didn't notice Sarah's look, who watched the scene from the door, her heart heavy with the weight of her own secret. In the basement, her true prostheses awaited the right moment, while her mind waged a battle between revealing the truth or remaining in the shadows. What no one knew was that this misunderstanding would be just the beginning of a series of events that would forever change the lives of all involved. On the horizon, a storm was forming, ready to bring to light truths long hidden. The morning. Sun illuminated the mansion's garden when Emily arrived, carrying a folder full of documents that, according to her, contained information about the development of the prostheses. Robert received her with renewed enthusiasm, his eyes shining with a hope he hadn't shown in a long time. Sarah, busy cleaning the adjacent room, felt her heart tighten with each of Emily's words. The lies flowed with frightening naturalness. As she described processes and techniques she clearly didn't understand. "The special material was ordered from Germany," Emily explained, gesturing animatedly. "The doctors say that in a few weeks you'll be able to start the tests." Robert held Emily's hand with adoration. "I can't believe you did all this for me. All this time you were away." "It was for this, my love," Emily quickly completed. "I couldn't tell you, I wanted it to be a surprise." Sarah deliberately dropped a vase, interrupting the moment. "I'm sorry," she murmured, bending down to collect the pieces. Her eyes briefly met Emily's, who averted her gaze, visibly uncomfortable. At night, alone in the basement, Sarah contemplated her true prostheses, the work of months, fruit of her knowledge in biomechanical engineering, a life she had left behind after circumstances she preferred not to recall. The pieces gleamed under the dim light, each component meticulously designed to provide maximum mobility and comfort. A noise on the upper floor alerted her. Footsteps. Someone was coming down the basement stairs. Quickly, Sarah covered her work with an old tarp, but she wasn't fast enough. "What are you doing here?" Emily's voice cut through the darkness like a razor. Sarah turned slowly. "Just organizing some cleaning materials, ma'am." Emily approached, her heels echoing on the concrete floor. Her astute eyes scanned the environment, stopping on the poorly placed tarp. "At 11 at night? I take advantage of the silence to do a more detailed job," Sarah responded, keeping calm. Emily took a few more steps, her hand extending towards the tarp. "And what do we have here?" Sarah's heart raced, but before Emily could reveal her secret, a call from upstairs saved the situation. "Emily, where are you?" Robert's voice echoed. "Coming, darling," Emily responded, casting one last suspicious look at Sarah before going up the stairs. In the days that followed, Sarah noticed Emily's distrustful looks. The tension grew with each encounter. Each word exchanged carried a different weight. Meanwhile, Robert remained immersed in the illusion of his fiancée's selfless love. One afternoon, while Sarah was tidying the main bedroom, she found a forgotten cell phone. Emily's. A message was flashing on the screen. "We need to meet today. I can't wait any longer, SJ." Sarah hesitated for just a second before leaving the device exactly where she had found it. It wasn't her role to reveal secrets, even if her heart screamed, against the injustice she was witnessing. Robert, oblivious to all this, was increasingly excited about the prospect of the prostheses. During his conversations with Sarah, which were becoming more and more frequent, he shared his dreams and plans. "I'll be able to dance with Emily at our wedding," he commented one morning, his face illuminated by hope. "All thanks to her." Sarah swallowed hard, continuing her work in silence. The words she wanted to say remained stuck in her throat, heavy as lead. In the basement, her true prostheses awaited, almost ready. The moral dilemma consumed her: reveal the truth and destroy Robert's current happiness, or remain silent, allowing a lie to build his future? The answer came unexpectedly. One night, while everyone was asleep, Emily went down to the basement again. This time, Sarah couldn't hide her work in time. Emily's eyes widened as she recognized what she saw. Prostheses, far more advanced than anything she had promised Robert. "So this is it," Emily whispered, her voice trembling with contained anger. "You're trying to sabotage me." "No, ma'am. I just want to help." "Help?" Emily laughed humorlessly. "A housekeeper who develops biomechanical prostheses in the basement. Who do you think you are?" The confrontation that followed would change the course of all lives in that house. The truths and lies that floated in the shadows began to emerge, ready to explode like a long-contained storm. The confrontation in the basement between Sarah and Emily intensified with each second. The dim light cast dramatic shadows over the two women, while the prostheses silently gleamed on the improvised table. "You're going to explain to me exactly what this is," Emily demanded, her perfectly manicured fingers pointing at Sarah's work. "And you're going to explain it now." Sarah straightened her posture, years of knowledge and dignity emerging in her voice. "Before being a housekeeper, I was a biomedical engineer in Sweden. I worked with developing advanced prostheses." "And why are you here cleaning bathrooms if you're so brilliant?" The sarcasm in Emily's voice was cutting. "Not all stories have happy endings, Miss Emily. Sometimes we need to start over from scratch." Sarah gently touched one of the prostheses. "When I saw Mr. Hawkins after the accident, I knew I could help." Emily circled the table, examining the work with critical eyes. "This is very convenient, isn't it? The savior maid, the vulnerable employer." "It's nothing like that," Sarah interrupted, her voice firm. "I just wanted to..." "Wanted what? To take my place?" Emily approached threateningly. "Listen well, you opportunist. Robert is my fiancé and these prostheses are my project. If you dare say a word..." "Emily?" Robert's voice echoed from the top of the stairs, interrupting the threat. "Is someone down there?" Panic crossed Emily's face. Quickly, she whispered to Sarah, "Not a word about this or you lose your job, and good luck finding another one with a daughter to support." Sarah watched Emily climb the stairs, completely transforming, as she met Robert. Her sugary voice echoed, "Darling, I was just checking some cleaning products with Sarah." In the days that followed, the tension in the mansion became palpable. Emily started to appear more frequently, her eyes always vigilant over Sarah. The conversations between Robert and Sarah, once natural and comforting, became brief and watched. During a particularly tense afternoon, Sarah was organizing the library when she overheard a phone conversation coming from Robert's office. "I can't wait to show the prostheses to everyone," he was saying, excited. "Emily has been amazing. Who would have thought that behind that socialite was such a brilliant mind?" Sarah closed her eyes, the weight of the lie crushing her chest. In her pocket, she carried a flash drive with all the projects and technical specifications of the true prostheses, her last hope of bringing the truth to light. That night, as she finished her chores, Sarah was surprised by sounds coming from the office. Emily was talking in a low voice on the phone. "Jack, I can't talk now." "Yes, I know we need to meet." "No, Robert doesn't suspect anything." "The prostheses?" "I'm improvising, darling. You know I always get what I want." Sarah's heart raced as she realized the depth of the lie. It wasn't just about the prostheses. There was much more at stake. The next day, during breakfast, Robert received a call that would change everything. It was from the hospital, confirming the arrival of his prostheses, the basic ones that the medical team had developed, far inferior to those created by Sarah. "Emily, love, they've arrived. We can go get them today," he announced, radiant. Sarah, who was serving coffee, observed the momentary panic in Emily's eyes. The farce was about to crumble. "Darling," Emily began, her mind working quickly, "maybe we should wait. My project isn't fully ready yet, and..." "But you said everything was on track," Robert frowned, confused. The moment of tension was interrupted by Emily's cell phone. On the screen, a message from Jack shone, "I need to see you now. I can't take this situation anymore." Robert, by chance, caught the reflection of the message in the dining room mirror. His face paled. "Who is Jack?" His voice came out controlled but laden with contained emotion. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah, still standing with the coffee pot in her hands, witnessed the beginning of the collapse of a castle built on lies. Emily opened her mouth to respond, but the words didn't come out. Her gaze crossed with Sarah's, a silent plea for help. That wouldn't come. The silence in the dining room was as dense as fog. Robert kept his eyes fixed on Emily, waiting for an explanation that she struggled to formulate. Sarah remained motionless, the coffee pot still in her hands, an involuntary witness to this crucial moment. He's just the supplier of the special parts for the prostheses, Emily finally answered, her voice trembling slightly. He's anxious because the deadlines are tight. Robert leaned forward in his wheelchair, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. Is that so? And why does he can't take this situation anymore? You're misinterpreting things, darling. Emily tried to smile, but the gesture came out forced. It's just a professional matter. Sarah began to discreetly withdraw, but Emily stopped her. Sarah, please serve Mr. Hawkins more coffee. It was an obvious attempt to change the subject. As Sarah served the coffee, her hands slightly trembling, Robert continued. Funny because in the last few months you've been so busy with these prostheses, but now that the ones from the hospital have arrived, you want to postpone. It's more complicated than that, Emily defended herself. My project is more advanced. We need to wait. What project, Emily? Robert's voice rose. Show me the drawings, the technical specifications. Do you have something concrete to show me? Emily's face paled. Her eyes quickly ran to Sarah, who kept her gaze lowered. I have everything in my office, she stammered. I can bring it. Tomorrow. It was at that moment that Emily's cell phone rang again. On the screen, another name appeared. Jack. The contact photo showed a young, elegant man hugging Emily on what appeared to be a beach. Robert remained silent for long seconds, observing the photo. When he finally spoke, his voice was laden with a frightening calm. How long? Robert, I can explain. How long? The shout echoed through the mansion. Sarah instinctively took a step forward, as if wanting to protect Robert, but restrained herself. It wasn't her place to interfere, not yet. 3 months, Emily whispered, tears starting to roll. Since the accident. The revelation hit Robert like a physical blow. His hands gripped the arms of the chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. So there was never any project, was there? The prostheses, the research, all lies. Emily began to sob, her mask of perfection completely undone. I tried, Robert. I swear I tried to continue, but after the accident, everything changed. Jack was there when I needed support the most. When you needed support, Robert laughed humorlessly. I lost my legs, Emily. My legs. And you needed support. Sarah could no longer contain herself. With a courage she didn't know she possessed, she put the coffee pot on the table and spoke. Mr. Hawkins, there's something you need to know. Emily stood up abruptly. Shut up. You have no right. The prostheses exist, Sarah continued, ignoring Emily. But they weren't made by her. Robert looked at Sarah, confused. What are you talking about? Sarah took a deep breath and began to tell her story, about her past as an engineer in Sweden, about the nights in the basement, about the prostheses she had developed especially for him. As she spoke, Emily sank deeper and deeper into her chair, defeated. I can prove everything, Sarah concluded, removing the flash drive from the pocket of her uniform. Every calculation, every drawing, every test is here. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert alternated his gaze between the two women, one who had lied about everything and another who had done everything in silence. Why? He finally asked Sarah. Why did you do all this without saying anything? Because sometimes, Mr. Hawkins, true love doesn't need recognition. It simply acts. The following morning dawned differently at the Hawkins mansion. The air seemed lighter, as if the weight of lies had been carried away by the breeze that entered through the open windows. Robert had spent the night awake, absorbing all the revelations of the previous day. Emily didn't return after leaving, the mansion in tears. Her last words still echoed through the corridors. I really tried to love you like before, Robert, but I couldn't be strong enough. Sarah arrived punctually at 7 o'clock, as always. She found Robert in his office, staring fixedly at the computer, where he had spent the night analyzing the files from the flash drive. Good morning, Mr. Hawkins, she greeted softly, hesitating at the door. Come in, Sarah, he responded, his voice hoarse from fatigue. Please sit down. We need to talk. Sarah adjusted her uniform and sat down, her hands intertwined on her lap, demonstrating her nervousness. "I spent the night studying your projects," Robert began, turning the monitor so she could see. "It's extraordinary work, far beyond what any medical team has managed to develop so far." "Thank you, sir." "Don't call me sir," he interrupted. "Not after all this. Please call me Robert." Sarah nodded, a small smile appearing on her lips. "Why did you hide your talent all this time? Why work as a maid when you could be revolutionizing medicine?" Sarah took a deep breath before answering. "Sometimes life forces us to take different paths than we planned. When I left Sweden, I needed to start over from scratch. My daughter needed stability, a new beginning." "And why didn't you tell me about the prostheses from the beginning?" "Because you were happy believing they were a gift of love from Emily. I didn't want to destroy that." Robert was silent for a moment, processing her words. "Even if it meant letting her take credit for your work. Sometimes seeing someone happy is reward enough," Sarah responded simply. Robert turned his chair to the window, observing the garden that was beginning to awaken with the morning sun. "You know, Sarah, last night, after Emily left, I realized something. It wasn't just about the prostheses, it was about who really stood by my side all this time." Sarah felt her heart accelerate but remained silent. "It was your words that gave me strength on the hardest days," he continued. "Your look that never showed pity, only understanding. Your small actions that made my life easier, without me even realizing it." Turning back to her, Robert picked up an envelope from his desk. "This is a formal proposal. I want you to lead the prosthetics development department at Hawkins Technologies. Your work is revolutionary, Sarah. It can help thousands of people." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "But what about my daughter? Sophie will have everything she needs: education, medical care, a bright future. This isn't charity, Sarah. It's recognition for your talent and dedication." Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands, still processing the radical change her life was about to undergo. "There's one more thing," Robert continued, his voice softening. "I want you to help me with the rehabilitation, not as an employee, but as a partner. Together we can transform this technology into hope for other people." I don't know what to say," Sarah stammered, emotional. "Say you accept. Say you'll help me rebuild not just my legs, but also my life." At that moment, a ray of sunlight entered through the window, illuminating Sarah's face. Her tears sparkled like diamonds as she smiled, finally allowing herself to dream of a different future. "Yes," she answered simply. "Yes to everything." The day that was beginning brought with it the promise of a new start. In the basement, the prostheses awaited, no longer hidden in the shadows, but ready to bring light to the lives of many people. And in the Hawkins mansion, two broken souls began to heal, discovering that sometimes you need to lose something to find something much more valuable. The transformation of the Hawkins mansion began immediately. The old basement, once dark and dusty, was converted into a state-of-the-art laboratory. Modern equipment replaced the old boxes, and Sarah's improvised table gave way to a professional workstation. Sophie, Sarah's daughter, was enchanted with the changes. At 8 years old, her eyes shone with admiration as she saw her mother working in the new laboratory, no longer hidden in the shadows of the night. "Mom, now you're a real scientist again," exclaimed the girl, running between the work tables. Sarah smiled, adjusting a delicate component of the prosthesis. "Actually, sweetheart, I always was. I was just waiting for the right moment to come back." Robert observed the scene from the laboratory door, his heart warming at the sight of that small family. In the last few weeks, since the revelation about Emily, he had discovered a new kind of happiness, one that didn't depend on appearances or social status. "Sophie," he called, making the girl turn with a smile, "how about showing your mother the drawing you made for the new company logo?" Sophie ran to her backpack, taking out a carefully folded paper. On it was a colorful drawing of two people holding hands, one in a wheelchair and the other standing, surrounded by gears and hearts. "It's for Project New Beginning," she explained proudly, "because everyone deserves a second chance." Sarah and Robert exchanged a meaningful look. The project name had emerged naturally, reflecting not only the purpose of the prostheses, but also the personal journey of everyone involved. Weeks turned into months. Work in the laboratory progressed rapidly, with Sarah leading a small team of engineers personally selected by Robert. The original prostheses were perfected, incorporating even more advanced technologies. One afternoon, while testing the new pressure sensors, Robert received an unexpected message. It was from Emily. "I need to see you," the message said. "There's something you need to know." Sarah, noticing the change in Robert's countenance, approached worriedly. "Is everything okay?" "Emily wants to meet me," he responded, showing the message. "Says she has something important to tell me." "And are you going?" Robert looked at Sarah, noticing the concern in her eyes. "Not alone. I'd like you to come with me." The meeting was scheduled for the following day in a discreet cafe in the city center. Emily was already there when they arrived, her face pale and without the usual impeccable makeup. "Robert, She stopped upon seeing Sarah. "I didn't know you'd be coming accompanied." "Sarah is part of my life now, Emily. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of her." Emily took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she held her coffee cup. "I came to ask for forgiveness, not for what I did. I know that's unforgivable, but for how I did it." "Go on," Robert encouraged, his voice neutral. "Jack left me." She let out a bitter laugh. "Ironic, isn't it? I found out he had been cheating on me for months with his secretary." Sarah observed how Robert remained impassive in the face of the revelation. The hurt and furious man from months ago had given way to someone stronger, more serene. "I'm sorry for you, Emily," he responded sincerely, "but I thank you for coming. Your honesty, even if late, means something." "You're different," Emily observed, her eyes passing from Robert to Sarah. "More at peace." "I am, and I owe much of that to Sarah. She taught me that sometimes we need to lose something to find something much greater." Emily nodded slowly, silent tears running down her face. "I saw the news about Project New Beginning. It's incredible what you're doing." "Sarah is the brilliant mind behind it all," Robert smiled, looking proudly at the woman by his side. "She always was." The meeting ended calmly, with Emily saying goodbye and sincerely wishing the best for both of them. On the way back to the mansion, Robert held Sarah's hand. "Thank you for coming with me today." "I'll always be by your side," she responded simply. That night, while Sophie slept in the room that was now hers in the mansion, Sarah and Robert worked in the laboratory, finalizing the last adjustments on the prostheses. Tomorrow would be the big day, the first official test. The future opened up before them, full of possibilities and promises. And although neither of them knew exactly what awaited them, they were sure of one thing: they would face everything together. The morning of the official test dawned with a mix of expectation and nervousness hovering over the Hawkins mansion. Sarah had spent much of the night reviewing every detail of the prostheses, while Robert alternated between moments of anxiety and determination. Sophie, sensing the importance of the day, woke up early and prepared a special breakfast with the help of Mrs. Thompson, the housekeeper. When Robert and Sarah arrived in the kitchen, they were greeted with a table full of fruits, breads, and a cake, decorated with the words, "Good luck, superheroes," written in colorful frosting. "Sophie, this is wonderful," exclaimed Sarah, hugging her daughter. Robert, moved by the gesture, affectionately ruffled the girl's hair. "Thank you, little one. This means a lot to us." After breakfast, everyone headed to the laboratory. A small medical team was waiting, along with some project engineers and a representative from the Department of Health, who had shown interest in expanding the technology to the public system. Sarah made a final check on the prostheses, her skilled fingers meticulously adjusting each component. Robert watched, feeling a mixture of admiration and gratitude for this woman who had transformed his life in so many ways. "Are you ready?" asked Sarah, approaching with the prostheses. Robert nodded, his voice choked with emotion. "More than ever." The process of putting on the prostheses was slow and meticulous. Each connection, each adjustment was made with extreme care. Sophie watched everything with wide eyes, holding Mrs. Thompson's hand. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Sarah took a step back. "Okay, we can try now." The silence in the laboratory was palpable. All eyes were fixed on Robert as he slowly moved the new legs. The soft sound of the mechanisms was the only thing that could be heard. "I'm feeling it," whispered Robert, tears in his eyes. "I can feel the floor." Sarah smiled, tears also running down her face. "The pressure sensors are working perfectly. Now shall we try standing up?" With the help of Sarah and 2 physiotherapists, Robert slowly rose from the wheelchair. His first moments standing were unstable, but the determination on his face was evident. "Daddy is standing," shouted Sophie, momentarily forgetting that Robert wasn't her biological father. No one corrected the girl. The moment was too precious to be interrupted. Step by step, Robert began to walk. Each movement was a victory. Each meter covered an achievement. Sarah walked by his side, ready to help if necessary, but Robert was determined to do this on his own. When he reached the end of the laboratory, Robert turned to everyone, a radiant smile on his face. It worked, it really worked. The room exploded in applause and congratulations. The Department of Health representative immediately began talking about expanding the project, about how that technology could change the lives of thousands of people. But for Robert, at that moment, only Sarah existed. He walked to her, each step firmer than the last, and hugged her tightly. "Thank you," he whispered in her ear, "for everything." Sarah returned the hug, feeling that this moment marked not only a technological victory, but also the beginning of something new between them. Sophie ran to the two, throwing herself into the hug. "We're a family of superheroes now," Robert laughed, picking up the girl in his arms with his new legs. "Yes, we are, and we have a lot of work ahead of us." That night, after all the celebrations and meetings, Robert and Sarah were alone in the mansion's garden. The full moon illuminated the sky, reflecting in the pool and creating an almost magical scenario. "You know," Robert began, holding Sarah's hand, "when I had the accident, I thought my life was over, that I would never be happy again." Sarah looked at him, waiting for him to continue. "But now I realize that accident was the beginning of something wonderful. It brought me you, Sophie, a greater purpose." "Robert," Sarah began, but he gently interrupted her. "Let me finish, please. Sarah, you gave me back not just the ability to walk, but also to love, to dream, and I want to spend the rest of my life giving that back." Slowly, Robert knelt before her, taking a small box from his pocket. "Sarah, would you give me the honor of marrying me?" The tears in Sarah's eyes sparkled under the moonlight. Without hesitation, she answered, "Yes, Robert, 1,000 times yes." As they kissed, sealing that perfect moment, both knew that this was just the beginning. Project New Beginning had given Robert new legs, but their love had given both of them a new heart, a new life. And somewhere in the mansion, little Sophie dreamed of the bright future that awaited them, a family united not by blood, but by love and the determination to make a difference in the world. The months that followed the success of the prostheses test were a whirlwind of activities for Robert and Sarah. Project New Beginning gained national prominence, attracting the attention of the media, investors, and especially people who desperately needed that technology. The Hawkins mansion, once a symbol of luxury and ostentation, transformed into a center of hope. The laboratory was expanded, now occupying the entire east wing of the property. Daily, dozens of people arrived in search of a chance to regain their mobility. On a Wednesday morning, while Sarah was working in the mansion's laboratory on a new prototype of a children's prosthesis, Robert entered hurriedly, his face pale and tense. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Alarmed by Robert's tone, Sarah put down her tools. "What happened? Did something happen to Sophie?" Robert shook his head, sitting heavily in a nearby chair. "No, Sophie is fine. It's Emily." The name of Robert's ex-fiancée hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Sarah felt a tightness in her chest. "What about her? She's back in the country," Robert began, hesitant. "And she has a son, a boy of almost 2 years. Sarah held her breath, immediately understanding the implications. "And she says that the boy is mine," Robert completed, running, his hands over his face in a gesture of weariness. "She wants to do a paternity test." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah processed the information, her mind a whirlwind of emotions and thoughts. "But how is this possible?" she finally asked. "Hadn't you had a vasectomy before marrying her?" Robert nodded, frustrated. "Yes, I did, but Emily claims the boy was conceived before the procedure. The dates, well, they match up." Sarah approached Robert, holding his hands. "What do you want to do?" "I need to know the truth," he answered, looking into her eyes. "If this boy is really my son, I have responsibilities. But Sarah, I want you to know that this doesn't change anything between us. You and Sophie are my family." Sarah hugged Robert, feeling the weight of the situation. "We're in this together, remember? We'll face this as we've always done, united." In the days that followed, the tension was palpable in the mansion. Sophie, now 10 years old, perceived that something was wrong, but the adults tried to protect her from the situation. The meeting with Emily was scheduled for a week later, at a neutral laboratory. When the day arrived, Robert and Sarah went together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came. Emily was there, holding a dark-haired boy in her arms. Upon seeing Robert, the little one hid his face in his mother's shoulder. "This is Michael," Emily said softly, her eyes avoiding Sarah's. "Michael, say hi to Robert." The DNA collection procedure was quick and painless. While they waited for the results, which would take a few days, the atmosphere was tense and uncomfortable. "Why now, Emily?" Robert finally asked. "Why wait so long?" Emily sighed, adjusting Michael in her lap. I wasn't sure at first. And then, when I got scared. Scared of facing all this, of changing everyone's lives. But Michael deserves to know his father, if you really are his father." Sarah observed the interaction, her heart divided between compassion and concern. The boy was adorable, with large, curious eyes that resembled Robert's. Back at the mansion, Robert and Sarah had a long conversation with Sophie, explaining the situation as best they could. The girl, surprisingly mature, hugged them both. "If it's true," she said, "does it mean I'll have a little brother?" Sophie's innocent question brought tears to Sarah and Robert's eyes. "Maybe, sweetheart," Sarah answered, "but no matter what happens, we'll always be a family." The days that followed were an emotional roller coaster. Work on Project New Beginning continued, but everyone's mind was on the pending test results. Finally, the envelope arrived. Robert, Sarah, and Emily gathered again at the laboratory. With trembling hands, Robert opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the document and then, "It's positive, I am Michael's father." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Emily let out a relieved sob. Sarah squeezed Robert's hand in support. And Robert looked at little Michael with a mixture of emotions in his gaze. "What do we do now?" asked Emily, her voice laden with uncertainty. Robert looked at Sarah, seeking strength in her eyes. She nodded slightly, a silent gesture of support and understanding. "Now," Robert began, his voice firm, "now we figure out how to make this work, for Michael's sake, for all of our sakes." As they left the laboratory, Robert carrying Michael in his arms for the first time, Sarah reflected on how life could change in an instant. Project New Beginning had taught them all about adaptation and overcoming. Now they faced a new kind of beginning, one that would test the limits of their love, understanding, and ability to forgive. The Hawkins family was about to embark on a new journey, one that no one could have predicted. But together, with love and determination, they were ready to face any challenge that fate had in store for them. The months that followed the discovery of Robert's paternity were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments for everyone involved. The Hawkins mansion, once a haven of tranquility, now buzzed with new dynamics and challenges. Sarah, demonstrating admirable strength and understanding, was the first to suggest that Emily and Michael move into one of the guest houses on the property. It will be easier for Robert to get to know his son, and for all of us to adapt to this new reality, she argued. The decision wasn't easy for anyone. Sophie, initially excited about the idea of a brother, now struggled with confusing feelings of jealousy and insecurity. Emily, in turn, felt out of place and guilty about the whole situation. One afternoon, while Robert was playing with Michael. In the garden, Sarah found Emily alone on the porch of the guest house, her eyes red from crying. "May I sit down?" Sarah asked softly. Emily nodded, surprised by the gentleness in Sarah's voice. "How do you manage?" she finally asked. "How can you be so understanding after everything I did?" Sarah sighed, looking at Robert and Michael in the distance. "It's not easy, Emily, but I learned that resentment only poisons us. And looking at that boy, I see that he deserves to have every chance at a happy family." "I'm so sorry," Emily whispered, tears streaming down. "For everything. For the lie about the prostheses, for abandoning Robert when he needed me most, for hiding Michael for so long." "The past can't be changed," Sarah responded, placing a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. "But the future is in our hands. For Michael, for Sophie, for all of us. We need to find a way to move forward." That conversation marked a turning point. Slowly, day by day, everyone began to strive to create a new family dynamic. Robert divided his time between work on Project New Beginning, moments with Sophie and Sarah, and the precious hours getting to know Michael. The boy, initially shy, soon became attached to his father, enchanted by his magic legs. Sophie, with the wisdom that only children possess, was the one who really broke down the barriers. One afternoon, she appeared at the guest house with her favorite toys. "Does Michael want to play with me?" she asked timidly. The smile on the boy's face was the answer everyone needed. Soon, the laughter of the two children echoed through the garden, a melody that warmed the hearts of all the adults. Meanwhile, Project New Beginning continued to grow. Sarah, inspired by the personal challenges they faced, began to develop a new program focused on psychological support for families affected by sudden physical changes. "It's not just the bodies that need to adapt," she explained in a meeting. "Minds and hearts also need support." One night, months after Michael's arrival, the extended family gathered for dinner. The table was full. Robert, Sarah, Sophie, Emily, Michael, and even Anthony, Sarah's father, who was now a constant presence in his daughters' and grandchildren's lives. As everyone shared stories and laughter, Robert asked for everyone's attention. "I wanted to thank you," he began, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank each one of you for your patience, love, and understanding. A year ago, I didn't know how we would handle all of this. But look at us now." He took Sarah's hand, looking into her eyes. "My love, your strength and compassion inspire me every day. You are the heart of this family." Turning to Emily, he continued, "Emily, thank you for bringing Michael into our lives and for trying so hard to make this work. Sophie," he smiled at his adopted daughter, "you taught me the true meaning of unconditional love. And Michael," he ruffled the boy's hair, "you are a joy I didn't know was missing in my life." Everyone at the table had tears in their eyes. Sarah raised her glass. "A toast," she proposed, "to family. Not the one we planned, but the one fate gave us. And which is more perfect than we could have imagined." The glasses clinked, sealing a moment of unity and love. Project New Beginning had given Robert new legs, but the love and understanding of everyone present had given each of them a new heart, capable of forgiving, loving, and starting anew. As the night progressed, with Sophie and Michael asleep on the couch and the adults talking softly on the porch, it became clear that this family, in all its complexity and imperfection, had found its own way to begin anew, and it was more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. 5 years passed since that dinner that sealed the union of the Hawkins family in its new configuration. Project New Beginning had become a global phenomenon, with research and adaptation centers spread across various countries. Robert and Sarah were frequently invited to international lectures and conferences, sharing not only their technical expertise, but also their incredible personal journey. On a sunny Sunday morning, the South Hawkins mansion was in a frenzy. It was the day of Sophie's big 15th birthday party. The garden was decorated with flowers and balloons, and an elegant tent sheltered tables laden with treats. Sarah was helping Sophie with the final touches on her dress when the teenager suddenly became serious. "Mom," she began, hesitant, "do you think one day I'll be able to do something as important as Project New Beginning?" Sarah smiled, adjusting a strand of her daughter's hair. "Sophie, darling, you already do something incredible every day." "How so?" asked the girl, confused. "You were the first to accept Michael as a brother, remember? Your love and understanding helped unite this family. That's as important as any technological advancement." Sophie hugged her mother, emotional. "Thank you, Mom. I love you, all of you." Downstairs, Robert was overseeing the final preparations with Michael, now 7 years old, as his little assistant. "Dad," called Michael, "when I grow up, I want to make magic legs like yours." Robert laughed, picking up his son. "Is that so? And why?" "Because I want to help people be happy, like you and Mommy Sarah do." Robert's heart swelled with pride and emotion. It was amazing how the children had absorbed the values of Project New Beginning, transforming them into their own life mission. The party was a success. Friends, family, and even some beneficiaries of Project New Beginning attended to celebrate Sophie. Emily, who now worked in the project's public relations area, helped to receive guests with a genuine smile. During the party, Robert went up to the small stage set up in the garden to make a speech. "Today," he began, "we celebrate not only our dear Sophie's 15th birthday, we celebrate an incredible journey of love, forgiveness, and new beginnings. A few years ago, I thought my life was over. Today, I see that it was just beginning." He paused, looking lovingly at his family. Project New Beginning was born from Sarah's genius and compassion, grew with the support of each one of you, and continues to flourish thanks to the love that unites us. Sophie, Michael, you are the future of this legacy. A legacy not just of technology, but of hope and unconditional love. Robert's words moved everyone. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, joined him on stage, bringing Sophie and Michael. "Family," Sarah said into the microphone, "is not just the one we're born into, but the one we choose to build every day. Thank you all for being part of ours." The party continued into the night, with music, dancing, and much joy. In a quiet moment, Robert found Anthony, Sarah's father, observing the scene with a serene smile. "You know, Robert," said the gentleman. "You know, Robert," said the gentleman. "When Sarah left Sweden, I thought she was making the biggest mistake of her life. But look at all this. She not only realized her professional potential, but built a wonderful family. Thank you for making my daughter so happy." Robert hugged his father-in-law, emotional. "We are all blessed, Anthony. Each challenge has made us stronger and more united." As the night progressed, Robert and Sarah found a moment to be alone, observing the party from afar. "Did you ever imagine," Sarah asked, leaning back against Robert's chest, that shy maid and that bitter millionaire would come so far?" Robert laughed softly, kissing the top of Sarah's head. "No, but I'm eternally grateful for every step of this journey. You gave me much more than new legs, Sarah. You gave me a new life." The couple watched Sophie and Michael dancing happily with their friends, Emily laughing in an animated conversation with other guests, and Anthony teaching some dance steps to one of the children benefited by the project. At that moment, it became clear that the true legacy of Project New Beginning wasn't just in the revolutionary prostheses or technological advances. It was there, in that unlikely family, in those transformed lives, in that love that overcame all barriers. And as the party continued, celebrating not only Sophie's birthday, but every new beginning that brought them there, Robert and Sarah knew that no matter what the future held, they would face everything together, with love, understanding, and the certainty that there would always be a chance to start anew. 10 years passed since Sophie's 15th birthday party, and the world had changed drastically. Project New Beginning, once a revolutionary initiative, was now a household name across the globe. The biomechanical prostheses developed by Sarah and her team were no longer the exception, but the norm for millions of people around the world. Robert, now 60 years old, with completely grey hair, but with the same eyes full of determination, observed the city of Los Angeles from the top of the new Project New Beginning headquarters building. The 50-story skyscraper, all in glass and steel, was a testament to the success they had achieved. "Amazing, isn't it?" said a familiar voice behind him. It was Sarah, now 55 years old, some expression lines marking her face, but with the same sparkle in her eyes that Robert had fallen in love with so long ago. "Sometimes I still can't believe it," Robert replied, pulling his wife close. "I remember when all this started in a dusty basement." Sarah laughed, leaning against her husband's chest. "And now we're about to launch the biggest innovation since the first prostheses." The couple was referring to Project Synapse, a revolutionary technology that promised to create a direct neural interface between the human brain and prostheses, allowing even more precise and natural control of artificial limbs. On the floor below, an important meeting was about to begin. Sophie, now 25 years old and recently graduated in biomedical engineering, was leading the development team of Project Synapse. Michael, at 17, was by her side as an intern, eager to follow in the footsteps of his sister and parents. "Nervous?" asked Michael, noticing Sophie repeatedly adjusting her presentation on the tablet. Sophie smiled at her brother. "A little. It's not every day we present something that can change the world, is it?" The conference room soon filled up. Investors, scientists, journalists, and even representatives from governments of various countries settled in, all eager to see the next revolution from Project New Beginning. Robert and Sarah entered last, taking their seats in the front row. With an encouraging nod to their children, Robert began the presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his strong voice echoing through the room. 20 years ago, we began a journey to restore mobility and independence to millions of people around the world. Today, we are about to take the next step in that journey." He gestured to Sophie, who took center stage with confidence. "It is with great pride that I pass the word to the leader of Project Synapse, my daughter, Dr. Sophie Hawkins." Sophie took a deep breath and began her presentation. With eloquence and passion, she explained the details of Project Synapse, showing simulations and preliminary results that left the audience speechless. "Imagine," she said, her eyes shining with enthusiasm, "prostheses that not only move like natural limbs but can feel heat, cold, texture, pressure. Imagine giving back not just mobility, but touch to people." The presentation continued for more than 2 hours, with Sophie and her team answering questions and demonstrating prototypes. At the end, the room erupted in applause. It was clear to everyone present that they were witnessing the beginning of a new era in medicine and assistive technology. As the guests dispersed, commenting animatedly on what they had seen, Robert and Sarah approached their children. "We're so proud of you," said Sarah, hugging Sophie and Michael. Robert, with tears in his eyes, added, "You're taking Project New Beginning beyond what we ever dreamed." The family shared a moment of hugs and smiles, aware that they were on the threshold of something extraordinary. Later that night at home, Robert found Sarah on the porch looking thoughtfully at the city lights. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping her in his arms. Sarah sighed, a mix of happiness and nostalgia in her voice, about how it all began, about how a terrible accident ended up uniting us and creating something so much bigger than ourselves. Robert nodded, understanding perfectly. "It's amazing how life works, isn't it? Who would have thought that shy maid and that bitter businessman would become this?" They laughed together, remembering the first days of their journey. The sound of footsteps interrupted the moment, and Sophie and Michael joined them on the porch. "So," Michael began, a mischievous smile on his face, "when are you going to retire and let us take control?" Sophie gave her brother a playful elbow. "Don't be silly, we still have a lot to learn from them." Robert looked at Sarah, a silent communication passing between them. "Actually," he said, turning to the children, "your mother and I have been thinking a lot about that. Project New Beginning has always been about giving people a second chance," Sarah continued. "Maybe it's time we give that chance to you, to lead the way to the future." Sophie and Michael were speechless, the realization of what their parents were proposing slowly sinking in. "But," Sophie stammered, "you are Project New Beginning. We can't just—" Robert raised his hand, gently interrupting her. "Project New Beginning is bigger than any of us. It always has been, and now it's time for it to evolve with the next generation." The family spent the rest of the night discussing the future, planning the transition, and sharing hopes and dreams for what was to come. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Project New Beginning, but for each of them. As the night progressed, Robert and Sarah watched their children with pride, knowing that the legacy they had built was in good hands. Project New Beginning would continue to give hope and new chances to millions, evolving and adapting, just as they had done throughout their lives. And so, under the starry sky of Los Angeles, a family united by love, adversity, and the desire to make a difference, prepared for yet another new beginning. The future was bright, full of possibilities, and they were ready to face it together as they always had. The year was 2045, and the world was facing an unprecedented crisis. A global pandemic, much more severe than any other ever seen, had left millions of people with severe neurological sequelae, affecting their mobility and motor coordination. Project New Beginning, now led by Sophie and Michael, was at the forefront of combating this new threat. Sophie, at 30 years old, had become a prominent figure in the international scientific community. Her work on Project Synapse had evolved to include not only prostheses, but also neural implants capable of restoring motor functions lost due to the disease. Michael, at 22, led the project's logistics and distribution division, ensuring that the technology reached those most in need, even in remote areas and developing countries. Robert and Sarah, although officially retired, continued as active consultants, offering guidance and support whenever necessary. On a tense morning, the Hawkins family gathered in the main conference room of the Project New Beginning Advanced Research Center. Holograms of scientists and world leaders flickered around the table, each bringing alarming updates on the progression of the pandemic. The situation in sub-Saharan Africa is critical, reported a WHO representative. Millions are losing the ability to walk, and local health systems are collapsing. Sophie frowned, her fingers dancing over the holographic keyboard in front of her. We're working 24 hours a day to adapt Project Synapse to meet this new demand. The problem is that each case seems unique. The virus affects the nervous system in unpredictable ways. Michael intervened, his voice laden with concern. And even if we come up with a solution, how are we going to distribute it on a global scale? Our production lines are already at their limit. Robert, observing the interaction, felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. His children were facing challenges that he and Sarah could never have imagined when they started Project New Beginning. Maybe, he began, drawing everyone's attention, it's time to rethink our approach. We can no longer rely solely on centralized solutions. Sarah nodded, immediately understanding where her husband was going. Decentralization. We need to empower local communities to produce and adapt our technologies. Sophie's eyes lit up. Of course, we can develop portable manufacturing units, something like advanced 3D printers, capable of producing customized prostheses and implants on site. And we can train local teams remotely, added Michael, enthusiasm growing in his voice, using virtual reality and artificial intelligence to guide the adaptation and implementation process. The room exploded into a brainstorm. In the days and weeks that followed, Project New Beginning underwent a radical transformation. The Local New Beginning initiative was launched, with production units being sent to the four corners of the world. Sophie led the development of a new generation of neural implants, capable of dynamically adapting to the changes caused by the virus in patients' nervous systems. Michael revolutionized logistics, using drones and autonomous vehicles to bring technology even to the most remote areas. Robert and Sarah, although no longer on the front lines, were a constant source of inspiration and wisdom. Their past experiences, facing seemingly insurmountable challenges, served as a beacon of hope in the darkest moments. A year after the beginning of the crisis, the first results began to appear. In a global video conference, Sophie presented data showing a significant reduction in permanent sequelae of the disease in areas where Local New Beginning had been implemented. We're not just treating symptoms, she explained, her voice full of emotion. We're empowering entire communities to rebuild themselves, to start anew. Michael complimented, each production unit we send becomes a center of hope. People are not just receiving help, they are learning to help themselves and others. The conference ended in virtual applause, with world leaders promising more support and resources to expand the program. That night, the Hawkins family gathered for a celebratory dinner. Emily, who had become a mother figure to Sophie and Michael over the years, prepared a special meal. As they savored the food, Robert raised his glass. "A toast," he began, looking proudly at each member of his family. "To new beginnings. To those we've already lived and those yet to come." Sarah added, tears of joy in her eyes. "And to the family we've built. Not just us, but every person whose lives we've touched along this incredible journey." Sophie and Michael exchanged emotional looks. "To you," said Sophie, her voice choked, "for teaching us that the true purpose of science is to serve humanity. And for showing us," completed Michael, "that love and compassion are the most powerful tools we have to change the world." As the night progressed, the family shared stories, laughter, and dreams for the future. Project New Beginning had evolved far beyond its humble origins, but its heart remained the same: the unshakable belief in the power of new beginnings, in the resilience of the human spirit, and in the transformative force of love. Outside, the world still faced enormous challenges, but inside that house, in the circle of that unlikely family united by destiny and strengthened by love, there was the certainty that, together, they could overcome any obstacle. And so, as the city of Los Angeles shimmered in the distance, the Hawkins family prepared for another chapter in their extraordinary journey, ready to face whatever the future held, always with hope, courage, and above all, love. The year was 2055, a decade after the global crisis that had almost devastated humanity. Project New Beginning, under the visionary leadership of Sophie and Michael, had not only helped overcome that crisis, but also expanded its horizons in ways no one could have predicted. The colonization of Mars was in full swing, with thousands of people living in giant domes on the surface of the red planet. And wherever humanity went, Project New Beginning followed. Sophie, now 40 years old, was at the forefront of the project's most ambitious initiative to date, adapting synapse technology to the unique conditions of Mars. The reduced gravity and intense radiation presented completely new challenges for prostheses and neural implants. Michael, at 32, coordinated interplanetary logistics, ensuring that supplies and equipment regularly reached the Martian colonies. His work was crucial not only for Project New Beginning, but for the entire colonization mission. On an Earth morning, which was Martian noon, the Hawkins family gathered for an interplanetary video conference. Sophie and Michael were on Earth, at the Project New Beginning headquarters in Los Angeles. Robert and Sarah, now 70 and 65 years old respectively, had surprised everyone by volunteering for a 2-year mission on Mars, helping to establish the first Project New Beginning clinic outside of Earth. "How are things over there, Mum and Dad?" asked Sophie, adjusting the holographic image that occasionally flickered due to the transmission delay. Robert, his face more wrinkled but his eyes still bright, smiled. "Fascinating. The challenges here are unique, but we're making incredible progress." Sarah agreed, adding, "The demand for our technologies is enormous. It's not just people with physical disabilities who need help here. Adapting to the Martian environment is difficult for everyone." Michael leaned forward, intrigued. "Tell us more about that. What kind of adaptations are you seeing?" "Well," Sarah began, entering scientific mode, "the reduced gravity is causing muscle atrophy and bone loss at alarming rates. We're using modified versions of our exoskeletons to simulate Earth's gravity and maintain the colonists' health." Robert continued, "And the neural implants are being used in ways we never imagined. We're helping people adapt to changes in the circadian cycle, improving their spatial perception in an alien environment, and even increasing their resistance to radiation." Sophie absorbed every word, her mind already working on new ideas and possibilities. "This is amazing. We can use this data to improve our technologies on Earth as well." "And that's not all," added Sarah, a glint of excitement in her eyes. "We're seeing potential applications for deep space exploration. Imagine astronauts with neural implants that allow them to hibernate during long interstellar journeys." The conversation continued for hours, with the family sharing ideas, challenges, and dreams for the future. When they finally said goodbye, with the promise of a new call soon, Sophie and Michael remained silent for a moment, absorbing everything they had heard. "It's incredible, isn't it?" Michael finally said. "We started by helping people walk again, and now we're literally reaching for the stars." Sophie nodded, a thoughtful smile on her face. "You know what's more incredible? How our parents, even after all these years, are still at the forefront, still inspiring us to go beyond." In the weeks that followed, Project New Beginning entered a new phase of frenzied innovation. Teams on Earth and Mars worked together, developing technologies that blurred the lines between medical rehabilitation and human enhancement. One day, as Sophie was working in her laboratory, testing a new neural implant prototype designed for Martian conditions, she received an urgent notification. It was from Michael. "Sophie, come quickly to the conference room. You need to see this." Intrigued and a little worried, Sophie rushed to meet her brother. As she entered the room, she saw Michael standing in front of a huge screen, his face a mixture of shock and wonder. "What is it? What happened?" asked Sophie, breathless. Michael turned to her, his eyes wide. "We just received a transmission from a probe on Jupiter's moons. Sophie, they found signs of microbial life." Sophie was speechless, the magnitude of the discovery slowly sinking in. "My God, this changes everything." "And that's not all," continued Michael, his voice trembling with excitement. "NASA and ESA are planning a manned mission to investigate. And guess who they want involved?" Sophie didn't need to guess. She knew that Project New Beginning, with its expertise in adapting humans to alien environments, would be crucial for a mission of this magnitude. That night, in an emergency call with their parents on Mars, the Hawkins family discussed the implications of this monumental discovery and the role that Project New Beginning could play. "It's unbelievable," said Robert, his voice full of admiration. "When I started this project, I never imagined we'd go so far." Sarah smiled, taking her husband's hand. "But that's exactly what we've always done, isn't it? Help humanity take the next step, no matter how impossible it seems." Sophie and Michael exchanged determined looks. "So what do you think?" asked Sophie. "Are we—" Sophie and Michael exchanged determined looks. "So, what do you think?" asked Sophie. "Are we ready to take Project New Beginning beyond Mars?" The response was unanimous and enthusiastic. Project New Beginning was about to embark on its most audacious adventure yet, bringing hope and innovation to the farthest frontiers of the solar system. As the call ended and Sophie and Michael began to plan the next steps, both felt a mixture of excitement and gratitude. Excitement for the incredible future that was opening up before them, and gratitude for the extraordinary journey that had brought them this far. Project New Beginning, born of love and adversity in a basement so many years ago, was now preparing to touch the stars. And the Hawkins family, united by destiny and strengthened by challenges, was ready to lead the way, always with hearts full of hope and eyes turned to the infinite horizon of tomorrow. The year was 2075, and humanity was on the verge of its greatest adventure. The mission to Jupiter's moons, dubbed Project Gaia, was about to be launched. Project New Beginning, now a global and interplanetary institution, was at the center of this historic endeavor. Sophie, at 60 years old, led the team responsible for life support systems and human adaptation for the long journey. Her cutting-edge neural implants would not only allow astronauts to survive the 5-year trip, but also help them communicate directly with the robotic probes that would explore the moons in search of life. Michael, at 52, had revolutionized space logistics. His quantum factories could materialize needed parts and supplies directly in space, drastically reducing the payload needed for long-duration missions. Robert and Sarah, now 90 and 85 years old respectively, had returned to Earth after their Mars mission. Although no longer actively involved in day-to-day operations, their advice and vision were still highly valued. On the eve of the launch, the Hawkins family gathered at the launch base in French Guiana. The enormous rocket, decorated with the logos of Project New Beginning and the various space agencies involved, rose majestically against the starry sky. "It's incredible to think how we got here," said Robert, his voice weak but still full of admiration. He was in an advanced wheelchair, a testament to the ongoing advances of Project New Beginning. Sarah, by his side, nodded, Despite her advanced age, her eyes still shone with the same curiosity and passion of decades ago. From a basement in Los Angeles to Jupiter's moons, who could have imagined? Sophie approached her parents, holding both their hands. All of this is thanks to you. You taught us to dream big, to never give up, to always seek ways to help others. Michael joined them, placing his hands on his parents' shoulders. And more importantly, you taught us the power of love and family. No matter how far we go in space, it's these bonds that keep us anchored. The family shared a moment of silence, each lost in their own reflections on the incredible journey that had brought them here. The silence was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. It was Emily, now 75 years old, accompanied by a young woman of about 30. "Sorry we're late," said Emily, smiling. "I'd like to introduce someone very special. This is Lucy, Robert's granddaughter." Lucy, with bright eyes that resembled Robert's in his youth, smiled shyly at the family. "It's an honor to finally meet all of you in person," she said. "My grandfather Michael has told me so many incredible stories about our family and project." "New beginning." Robert extended his trembling hand to his great-granddaughter. "Welcome to the family, Lucy. I'm so happy you could be here for this historic moment." Sophie and Michael exchanged emotional looks. Seeing 4 generations of the Hawkins family gathered at this crucial moment was a powerful testament to the legacy they had built. "So, Lucy," Sophie began, curious, "I heard you're following in the family footsteps with Project New Beginning." Lucy nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, I'm working in the bioengineering division on Mars. We're developing self-sustaining ecosystems that could be used in future colonizations." The conversation flowed animatedly, with Lucy sharing her innovative ideas and the family offering insights based on decades of experience. It was a beautiful example of how knowledge and passion for progress had been passed down from generation to generation. As the night progressed, excitement at the Space Center increased. Technicians and engineers rushed back and forth, making final preparations for the historic launch. Sophie was called for a final check of the astronauts' neural systems. Michael needed to supervise the final loading of the quantum factories onto the ship. Before separating, the family gathered for one last group hug. "Remember," said Sarah, her voice choked with emotion, "no matter how far we go or how big we become, the heart of Project New Beginning will always be the same, giving people a chance to start anew, to overcome limits, to achieve the impossible." Robert nodded, adding, "And to do all this with compassion, love, and an unwavering belief in the human capacity to evolve and adapt." As Sophie and Michael departed for their respective tasks, Lucy stayed behind with her great-grandparents, Emily, and her grandfather, Michael. Together, they watched the final preparations, each lost in their own thoughts about the future that was opening up before them. The next morning, when the sun rose on the horizon, illuminating the majestic rocket, the countdown began. Millions around the world and in the Martian colonies watched expectantly. When the rocket finally took off, tearing through the sky with a trail of fire and promise, the Hawkins family watched with tears in their eyes and hearts full of pride. It wasn't just a space mission taking off, it was the dream of generations, born from the love of 2 unlikely allies in a basement in Los Angeles, now reaching for the stars. As the ship disappeared into the blue sky, Robert squeezed Sarah's hand, both feeling the weight and glory of this moment. "We did it, my love," he whispered. "We gave the world a new beginning." Sarah smiled, tears of joy streaming down her wrinkled face. "No, darling, we gave the universe a new beginning." And so, as humanity launched itself into the unknown, the legacy of Project New Beginning shone brighter than ever, a testament to the power of love, perseverance, and the unwavering belief that, no matter how dark the present may seem, there is always hope for a new tomorrow. Project New Beginning, born from adversity and nurtured by love, had become a guiding light for humanity, illuminating the path to a future where every challenge was an opportunity to grow, evolve, and above all, begin anew.